The country where I come from, the truth is an irony. Just like animal farm, justice mean inequity. So who go say the truth? Who go say the truth? Christian can say silence, Islamic leaders silence, kings and queens silence, traditional leaders silence. So who go say the truth? We are them go so confused the call. Now by area why no better. We are them go so confused the call. One guy's out here why no better. Who go say the truth? Who go say the truth? Oh, he need it now, see what I see so. Now your friend on a nine come at them. Only papi obeka na sembia. So I want one obet you too. Everybody was afraid. And when Tina to my cottage, I nine. Once my boy dumping one and I see. But who go tell the truth? Nanai or say me. Nanso bien person beka wasam because everybody is afraid. Anya safwe muayini. Aku drop for nyina dalima. And who go say the truth? Obiaja konson so to grow your mansa to me be a kakobrafo. Efo anyina ye. Efo when you know yet. Na so kutrata down na so be dia back or why no keke. I fene for be man mo pia for efo ne cross on my mo. Hanya safwe mo ayini. Akuku trofo nyina dalima. And who go say the truth? Abaya di bote chino. Yedi bi bebo nyande bi kachi sa wodi o ma o pipi numa wodi o ma never shine my frafonsa. But who go tell the truth? TUC silence, even journalists silence. Oh, then who go say the truth? Right is right. Wrong is wrong, no matter how you justify. You say you wanna get rid of corruption. Someone want to help you, now the person become your target. Jobless no they mean senseless, poverty no they mean useless. One day them go resist.
Hello, good evening once again, and welcome to MyView show, coming to you live on today's Ghana News TV. With me, your host is Jerome Kpan. And let me equally remind you that we are also live on Switch by satellite and on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, all on today's Ghana News TV. It's always a joy to welcome you and to equally remind you that you can follow us as well on Twitter and TikTok, and also as podcast on Anchor FM. Wherever you are, it is a pleasure again to join you this evening. Another beautiful week that we have a discussion on Mother Ghana. This time around, we want to have a look at the computerized school placement system. Is it a blessing in disguise to us as a country, or is a curse? How does it help us to overcome the challenges which necessitated its implementation? What are your views on the school placement, computerized placement system? I will share my views, and we'll take a view from an expert in terms of educational assessment of our country. Once again, it's a pleasure to welcome you to MyView show. And wherever you are, kindly share the link with all your friends and others so that they might all join us and together we share our views on the way forward for Mother Ghana. Welcome and stay tuned.
Waiting there happy for Africa. Dusty old men holding on to power, leading the people to where the grave. Wicked criminal leaders. See them a come, them coming like an angel. But them a thief, them no say them a thief. Mr. President, you coming like a savior. But you a thief, you know say you a thief. Thief President, why a thieving so? Thief man, why a thief so? The people they must suffer, but you don't care so. Thief man, why a thief so? I see the people crying every day, yo. They want food, them can't find. I see the youth looking for a job, oh, every way, them can't find. Mr. President, him just barely food, oh. Him and the family, they no suffer, oh. Suffer, no poor man they suffer, oh. Suffer, rich man know they suffer. Suffer, no poor man they suffer, oh. Suffer, rich man they suffer, lie. See them a come, they coming like an angel. But them a thief, them no say them a thief. Mr. President, you coming like a savior. But you a thief, you know say you a thief. Thief President, why a thieving so? Thief man, why a thief so? The people they must suffer, but you don't care so. Thief man, why a thief so? Mr. President, why you dey lie so? Before election, you tell me you be angel. When you sick, you run go a London. When we sick, oh, we die for Kolebo. Mr. President, why you wicked so? Tell me how you dey sleep at night, oh. See them a come, they coming like an angel. But them a thief, them no say them a thief. Mr. President, you coming like a savior. But you a thief, you know say you a thief. Thief President, why a thieving so? Thief man, why a thief so? The people they must suffer, but you don't care so. Thief man, why a thief so? This is Mr. Traitor, Master of Sleeping. This is Mr. Traitor, Master of Sleeping. Yarambarayi Fiafiwo Alakpatowo Nayeruyaya.
Hello once again and welcome back to MyView show on today's Ghana News TV. And this evening we want to look at the computerized placement system for the senior high school and the matters arising, especially for this year 2023. And my guest for the show this evening is no other person than Mr. Albert Alan Dachia. Mr. Dachia happens to be a doctoral candidate, and he has a lot of experience in terms of cross-border educational systems. And this evening, we want him to share his knowledge on the computerized system that Ghana is practicing and the way forward. Mr. Dachia, you are most welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kpan, and I'm very grateful to be on your meeting, and a warm greeting to your viewers. Just before you start, I made a quick observation. I think the whole of last year, I appeared on your program once. And this year, we are in February, and this is the second time on your program. I must do something right, huh?
Definitely, definitely. A lot more will want to even hear you every day when it comes to education. And I'm not surprised that that is one of your areas or your area of expertise. And, when you have an expert giving a knowledge on an area, then that you have nothing else but to sit down and listen to that wisdom. And I'm pretty sure that many more, the difficulties they are having in our educational system will need a lot of people to enlighten a greater population as to the way forward, what we are doing, what we have not done right, and what we could do better. That is exactly why, and I'm pretty sure this is just the second appearance, but you will appear many more.
Yeah, you are right. I mean, they say that if you want to know how compassionate a country is, you look at how they take care of the elderly. But if you want to know how visionary a country is, you look at how they treat their young. And this is why education is so important. And it shouldn't be important to just me. It should be important to Ghana as a country because it tells us where we want to be and where we will be in the future. And so I guess this is quite important and should be is something that we should take very seriously and should be close to our hearts.
Wonderful. Great. Good to have you. And I'm sure a lot of people are itching to hear more from you because I think, I don't know, but we'll get to that point. Ghana currently, we are having a big challenge. If you listen to the investigative report of the fourth X-Street led by Manasseh Azuri, you'll see that something that has been put in place to help us overcome certain difficulties is rather generating more concern for a lot of parents. And today, it's good that we have you so that you tell us why did we as a country even adopt this computerized school placement system? Why did we even adopt in the first place?
Yeah, that documentary, that's the one on schools of Shima.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I watched that documentary and my heart bled. I was sad to get to have noticed that the very problems that we set out to solve are the very problems that have come back, and not just come back, but come back in double the fold. And you ask us how did or why did we even embark on how do you call it, computerized school and placement program? So this evening, maybe you are the older one, but this evening I'm going to play the role. I'm going to be an older head on young shoulders, and probably try to take you back a little, and then we try to recap how we got to where we are at the moment. And I mean, how did we get where we are? I was a kid at the time when this whole process started about how do you call that, computer school placement. And at the time, I don't know whether you remember how school selection was done. Well, do you remember?
Yeah, yeah.
And
You
I would
know?
not be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if you don't remember because people like you are dada bus. You were privileged to attend a private secondary school. So I wouldn't be surprised if you don't know. For people who were not lucky and fortunate like you, who attended Saito and went on to attend public schools, they probably are very familiar with the system that I'm going to, recount on this program. And how was the system? It was, everything at the time was pen and paper,
Yeah.
black and white. So if people at JHS had time to, well, it was time for them to write their BEC. I remember at the time they would mostly invite their parents to come to school, and then they would make selection of three schools: first choice, second choice, third choice.
First choice.
Then they wrote their BEC, and at the time when the results came, there was a 1 week period. I don't remember, it was 1 week or 2 weeks, whereby you see head teachers of senior secondary schools, they will pack their bags.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure where they used to go to. I mean, I grew up in Nottingham. I'm not sure whether they went to Tamale or they went to Accra. But those days, they will say they are going for selection,
Selection.
you know. And at the time, what history tells us is that at the time when they went for that selection, normally each student will have a card, a typical manual card, where they will write the grade of the student, and they write first choice, second choice, third choice. And the head teachers will sit in a conference room. Then they take the card of the student and pass it around. So they will go to first choice, and if the first choice head teacher wanted the student, he will take the card and put it in the system. Then the card doesn't go on, it doesn't keep going on in the system. But if he didn't want it, he will pass it on. Then we go to the next headmaster, then he'll consider. If he wanted, then he'll put it there. If he did not want, then he'll go on. Now, well, we probably, for those who wanted to attend schools, they would probably say that it was a problem. But I am sure that for a lot of head teachers and their wives and children, that was not a problem at all. At the time, that was their cocoa season.
Cocoa season.
You, at that time, if you went to the houses of head teachers and headmistresses, you would see goats, ducks, hens, turkeys, what have you. And for those who were lucky, even cows tied at their backyards. And that was how people were bribing or buying their way into senior secondary schools. So, but at a point, we noticed that this was not the way to go as a country. That we should, things like selection should be things that should be routine. They should not be things that that should lend themselves to human manipulations and everything. So we decided to adopt the computerized system. And I think that was in the year probably 2005 when it was when the system was first introduced. We changed the system altogether. Sort of try to remove the human element and reduce the corruption in the system. Of course, as one can imagine, this was not a lot of head teachers were not a fan of this system because it deprived them of their largesse and the beauty that they used to get around that time. But it sort of tried to sanitize the system a little bit, and then allow it to create a room for some kind of fairness in the system. And this is how we got to this situation where we have the computerized school placement system in Ghana.
Yeah. Wonderful. Looking at it now, comparing what we have today to the previous one, how does the system work differently, or how does it really work?
Well, as they call it, it's computerized. So it is meant to take away human elements in any of its form. That is what is meant to be. And I'm choosing my words carefully. I am saying meant to be.
Okay.
As to whether that is the case right now, that is a different matter altogether. Because the system as it were right now, if I explain the system as it were to you right now, it is probably going to make yours it will turn your head a little. So here is what the system is supposed to be like. So we have it all goes back to our grading system.
Okay.
So what happens is that if your ward was to write BEC, as a country, we have the grading system, what we call a cyanide system, which is a system of grading. Okay. And this in itself, the cyanide system in itself, is a little bit problematic because it's got its weaknesses, as opposed to using what could have called what they call the criterion reference test system. Okay. Now, I'll explain this a little.
Yeah.
You know, for the criterion reference system, the grades are set or the limits are set already. So say, for instance, for most cases, when we were growing up, we knew that if you got between 100 to 75, you got an A.
Yeah.
So it is not in doubt as to if everybody wrote the exams and got between 100 and 75, everybody scored an A and everybody was happy. Then we moved on to the next stage. If you got between 64 and 65 and 74, you got a B. And we all knew this. And then we moved on. But then as a system, we decided that for our grading system, we're not going to use that. We are going to use a cyanide system. And I see it's a little bit problematic. It depends on what the intent is. But this is the system that we decided to adopt. Which it places, this system places averages. So
the cyanide system essentially works on the averages.
Exactly. So if you for those who have knowledge on a bit of statistics, they would tell you that what you have like a normal curve, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you have a normal curve, few people perform above average, few people perform below average, and a majority of people are in the average, right? So the normal curve. So it's they call it the bell curve. Yeah. So this is how and that's how the cyanide system works. So the system works such that even before we go to mark our papers, we decide that only the top 4% would get A. Okay. So if you even scored 95, but most of but the top 4% of people scored between 100 and 96. Even the 95, you not get an A. You are pushed further to the B class. And it depends on how the people performed. If the following year the people did not perform so well, somebody then can get even aggregate 60, but still get an A. Because the system is looking at the top 4%.
Okay.
Then we'll move to B. Then we take the top 7% after the 4. They will move to the next. Then the averages then increased 17%, 17%. And this is to ensure that a majority of people are clustered around the averages and leave the top 4% for average, above average, and top the lower percentile for the below average, and those get the fails. So this is how the grading system works. So now when we adopted the system, and then we fed it into the school feeding. I'm saying school feeding, not school feeding. I'm saying school feeding because that is one of our problems. we are going to circle back to school feeding, but that is one of our problems. So yeah, and so we fed this into our school placement system, such that if we went to do the allocation or to place people once they wrote BEC, what we're looking at was to look at the raw scores. So somebody will come and say, "Oh, my son got 6." Your son may get 6. But when we get to the placement, we're no longer looking at aggregate 1. We are looking at aggregate 1. What's the number that the person got? And then we make those placements at that level. Now, in that system, when you are also choosing, there's something they call the cluster-based system. And the cluster-based system is such that if you were choosing your schools and you chose category A school, now let me briefly explain what category A schools are, category C schools are before we continue. Category A schools, the schools are categorized based on A, B, C, D. A means that's supposed to be the highest, B, C in that order. But that is not highest in terms of performance. That is highest in terms of demand for those schools. So if a school has a lot of demand, it's more than it can take. So depending on the demand and its ability to absorb, it's categorized as category A. And then as the demand reduces for those schools, then they begin to tear them down in that particular order. Okay. So if you chose a category A school, but decided to also tick a particular box as cluster in your category A schools, what that meant was that if your first choice, which was category A school, did not pick you, but then the system would go around looking for other category A schools, even if you didn't pick them.
Okay. Once
And
you
once
click on the cluster.
yes,
Okay.
and once it gets a placement in any category A school, even if you didn't pick, if it's not even within your place of origin, if it's not even close to where you stay, it will allocate you to that place.
Okay.
So this is one one of the criteria that we decided to use in the placement procedure. Now, but that is just one. But there are several other components to it. Now we go to what we call the overall grading system. They have what you call, if you have between aggregate 6 and aggregate 10, you are most likely going to get your first choice. Between aggregate 10 and aggregate 16, you get your second choice. But these are not guaranteed. It
Okay.
depends on availability. Now, so in that system, what we did was to learn a lot of things inside that whole system of allocating schools, such that by the end of the day, it does not matter how educated you are. I am trying to explain this thing in the simplest of its form.
Okay.
But even me, as I said, with over 5 years of studying basic education system in Ghana, I still do not understand that system of school placement. I don't get it. And it's not just me who do not get it. People say they get it, but when you ask them to explain, they get to a point and everybody gets confused. And that is where we circle back to where we are right now. Where what breeds corruption? Confusion in the system. Where a system is too convoluted and people cannot find their way around, it's a recipe for corruption. What breeds corruption? Where there is frustration in the system, where people do not understand the system and they go there and and they are frustrated. The next way is to try to buy their way out of the system,
Yeah.
and that is what has circled us back to where we are right now. Where if we dip figure further as this discussion goes along, we see that what we try to avoid when I started my conversation by telling you that head teachers were having a field day. Now they have taken that field day from the head teachers and now placed it in the hands of some other people who are high above the ladder, and those are now the people who are now getting the juice. And rather than getting a fowl, rather than getting a goat, rather than getting a cow, they are getting 10,000, they are getting 20,000, they are getting 30,000 to allocate the same things that the head teachers were doing. So we just took the same thing from the head teachers and placed in the hands of people who will take more and people who will chop more. So
That's quite interesting. Let me get this clarification before we move on. The other day, I watched a video where a parent was saying that her ward had aggregate 30, and the ward was not placed in a school. But a colleague of the ward who had aggregate 35 was placed in a school. What went wrong? Is it an underhand dealing, or is the system?
okay, like I said, and this is where we are. Once you start, we say when you are dealing with computers, the people who are into computers will tell you that in dealing with computers, it is garbage in, garbage out. What you feed into the system is what you get. Now, the moment you start getting people manipulating the system, you start getting human beings putting their hands inside the system. Now everything starts getting murky. Now, few years ago, government decided to adopt something. It was meant to be an affirmative action, and as we know, the proponents of affirmative action argue that that system is meant to do what? It is meant to be a system that is meant to bring some kind of equity in a system, compensate for weaknesses within the system, and try to bring weaker people up to meet people who already have an advantage in the system. So government decided that they are going to reintroduce some things they call, I think I'm trying to remember the name, the appropriate name they called it. They called it public equity policy.
Okay.
That is the official name they give to it. But in practice, what it is to revert back to what we call protocol.
Okay.
To revert back to what we call protocol. So this system is such that they reserve 30% of allocations of schools to predefined people. And then, so the policy was designed to ensure that we put people who have attended public basic schools, that the system has already decided that public basic schools are disadvantaged.
Okay.
And that they are disadvantaged over private basic schools. And that in order to create a level ground, we are now going to create that system where we can kind of discriminate positively to bring people in public basic schools at par with people in private basic schools. Okay, so they brought this policy where we have 30% allocation. Now, that 30% allocation, where does it go? They said it's reserved for landowners, maybe traditional areas where the school was built, so they reserve a quota for them. Reserve for PTA of the school. Reserve for old boys and old girls of the school. Reserve for, basically, it is reserved for who the protocol people say are supposed to get those protocols. And now, who are the people who have access to placing people in category A schools? I already defined what category A schools are. Who are the people who are responsible or who have access to using the protocol to grant access to those category A schools? Only 2 people in Ghana have access to those systems. Director General of Ghana Education Service, Minister of Education. So that system where you saw that people are from this place and they are allocated here, that is one arm of it. Now, there is another arm where this is a very strong claim, and we cannot prove it. But the reason why we cannot prove it is because they will not allow us to have access to that data.
Okay.
But we know this for a fact. And we see, if systems deteriorate, they deteriorate over time.
Sure.
Things do not just happen all of a sudden. So we have we are faced with a system right now where people who attend private schools go to write exams and people write basic school exams, where there is a strong feeling that there seem to be different marking criteria for public schools and for private schools.
There is already.
There is a different marking scheme for public schools and for private schools. And there is supposed to be an explanation for this. But when you hear the explanation, it's mind-boggling. Things just don't add up. You don't know how those decisions were arrived at. So when you put all of these things into the box, that is how come we arrive at that situation where somebody else would get aggregate 30 and get allocated to Achimota School, and somebody else get aggregate 6, and the person is struggling to get school placement because government policy of systemic discrimination have been used deliberately to give some people key access to some particular placement where they decide who goes where and who does not go where. And how is that not different, or how is that different from that system where I told you previously that head teachers were taking goods and fowls to allocate school placements? And that is that you probably have an answer.
Yeah, I'm sure we will still have to come back to the issue of seemingly the different marking schemes for the public schools and for the private schools. I still have an issue there. But before we get to that point, I want my producer to play a video for you to listen to, and then we see, has that also got an influence in the marking schemes or in the placement? Mr. Producer, can we have the video from your side?
School idea ya diaba no ya call me say wa I just say esro no a na e call game sa na school idea no se ba be. This free senior high school policy is a policy for the development of our country. We're not going back on it. We're not going to have it reviewed. We're going to continue with it. We're going to improve on it. We're going to develop the infrastructure so that we can develop the human capacity of our country. That is the position of the new patriotic party and of its...
Okay. Joe Latte, over to you. Now you listen to this. Some people are of the view that in order to showcase the success of the free senior high school policy or the free school policy that they have implemented, they have been able to influence the marking schemes right down to the basic level. Could that also play a role?
Well, see, what you are saying, some people have the opinion. Opinions are like noses. Everybody have their nose. Okay. So I can have my opinion, you can have your opinion, and these can be debated. But what cannot be debated are facts.
Good.
Okay. So when the facts point to one direction, your interpretation may be different, but the facts are what they are. And this is what I'm going to share with you. Okay. All right. So international best practice. UNESCO and everybody propose that for a country to take its education system seriously, that country ought to invest between 20 and 25% of its annual budgetary expenditure on education.
Okay.
That's what UNESCO prescribed. Okay. Now, the current president attended a conference. Let me try and remember the name. I think it was a global partnership for education champion. That was supposed to be the name of that conference. In that conference, he criticized successive governments, and he made a pledge that when he comes to power, that not less than 20% of his expenditure, and that between 4% and 6% of the GDP of Ghana would be invested in the education sector. That is what he said. Okay. Before he came to power, in 2016, Ghana was spending 17.3% of its annual expenditure, budgetary expenditure on education. Now, he came to power January 2017. This figure reduced from 17.3% to 15.4%. The following year, he managed to increase it by 0.2% to 15.6%. The following year, 2019, he dropped again to 15.5%. The following year, 2020, he increased again by 0.1% to 15.7%. In 2021, he reduced to 14.2%. And 2022, 2020, those are still figures we are still trying to unravel. So from a figure of 17.3%, since he came to power, he has not been able to meet that figure. Instead, he has been hovering at best At best, the best he has been able to do within this period has been 15.7%. Now, when they say Professor Doolittle, Mr. Promise can promise much, do little. This is what we are talking about. And from a position where he said he was going to be investing between 4 to 6% of our GDP on education, we have a situation where in 2022, he invested only 3.8%. Move to 2023, he's investing 3.09% in education. This is where our problems as a country begin. Now, as a country, we know that most of our budgetary expenditure on education come from GET Fund. From GET Fund. And how do you call that? From this amount, in our basic schools, we have about 6 million children who are in basic school. Now, he managed to reduce our expenditure on from GET Fund from an amount of 292 million in the year 2022. Now he's budgeting 164 million on basic education. So you see where we start to have problems as a country. And I'm trying to drive at one point, which is the investment in education, before we climb up to those things about marking and marking schemes and everything. Okay, so over the past 4 years as a country, our allocation to GET Fund has been on basic education has been around 15%, less than 20% of our investment. As we sit today, we introduced a new education system about 2 to 3 years ago. As we sit, majority of schools still do not have access to the textbooks of the reform that we introduced. At best, those that have them, they are having to share, they are having 2 to 3 textbooks per student in our system. As we sit today, 40%, an amount of 2.3 million children do not have desks in public schools in today Ghana, as we sit. And these are the systemic problems that we have had over the system in Ghana. But this is it doesn't probably paint the accurate picture. Let's just oppose that to the picture, the clip that you played, which is on how do you call that? Basic education, because he made a pledge that when he comes, he's going to introduce free senior secondary school. Now, against good advice or good counsel, that he was in a hurry to do this, and people who were around him were singing all over the place that this is the most visionary person in Ghana and that he is coming to bring free education. And people said there's nothing visionary about free education. Free education is a constitutional provision in our constitution. The Constitution of Ghana guarantees free education, but in a progressive manner. But and that is because the framers of the Constitution had reached a point where they knew that we were short of resources, and that to do it, we have to cut our coat according to the size of our cloth. So they specifically stipulated continuous free education. But he came and saddled us with this situation. Now, what did that do? What that did was that from the year 2017, budgetary allocation from to basic education have constantly been on a decline. In the year 2017, 70%, how do you call that? Out of the allocation to the education system, 20% was allocated to basic education. However, to secondary education, it was also 20%. And that was when they were still conceptualizing this idea of free basic education. In the year 2018, allocation to basic education reduced to 15%, but that of secondary education increased by 27%, increased to 27%. In the year 2019, basic education was 16%. That of secondary education was 25%. In the year 2020, basic education was 17%, but that of secondary education was 22%.
Okay.
So this is where we have the problem. So we have a government that says that education at the secondary level must be free, and they are providing free textbooks to secondary education. They are providing even free uniform to secondary education. They are supposed to be providing free feeding to secondary education. So they have made an assumption that when children are at the basic schools, their parents are so rich that they can pay for those things. But all of a sudden, when they get to secondary school, then the parents become poor and they can no longer pay, and government must come and pay. How is that? How does that make sense? So because of this, the performance at the basic school started reflecting. It started showing up. And that is where they brought this education, the affirmative action, in order to try to cover up for the lack of investment in the basic education.
In the basic education.
So this is how we built up to where we are. And now they came and brought this system, that what I told you earlier, where they said that children in who had private basic education were advantageous. So they wanted to bring affirmative action to come and level the situation. Now, by saying that, are you not admitting that? How did the private schools become better than how did the private schools become better than
schools? Yeah.
Are you not admitting that you have not done something right at the public schools, and that the private schools have done something better? And because they are doing something better than the public, you now punish the private schools and try to give an unfair advantage to the public. But in their conception of what private is, they think that when they sit in Accra and they say private schools, they think that every private school is like Morning Star, or every private school is like Christ the King, where people drive their children in V8, and they go and they are sitting in classes of 15 to 20 children per class. What they do not know is that in the education system of Ghana, those schools that are classified as private schools, a majority of them are what is called the underfinanced private schools, which is the private school that Mr. Asibisa and their wife would create behind the back of their house. Typically, it's categorized as private school. But the conditions there are worse than any public school you can ever get.
Sure.
But when these people go to write an exam, they are classified, they are viewed in the system as private school children. And the system now further go on to deprive them. So first of all, you, the government, is supposed to provide basic school education. You are unable to provide that. When private people take the initiative to provide private education to their people, you punish them for covering up the gaps that you, the government, could not provide. And this system about different marking schemes has been proven over time. You see, the problem, I think one of the problems, or it's not one, I think the major problem of this particular government, as we have it, is that they think that human beings, or that the people they are dealing with, they do not have brains and that they cannot think. One thing, if you are in social science, one thing that you know is that human beings have agency. Once they are confronted with a structural problem, they think their way out of the structural problem and they apply their agency. Now, this problem about private schools and public schools having different marking schemes have been in the system for some time. Lots of parents have been suspicious about it. We have a system right now where parents are now beginning to take their Form 1, Form 2 children who are in private basic schools to go and write BEC in public basic schools.
Public school, yes.
And they blow. The same children come back to private schools, they write, and they fail.
Yeah.
And this is where we cannot prove it. We know it, but we can't prove it. Why can't we prove it? Because they don't give us the data.
Yeah, they will not give the details. They don't give the details. But the reality on the ground is the A in the public school is now at 70 and the private school is 90. But you cannot have that evidence to hold them to it.
We know this for a fact. But they will not allow us to prove it.
Yeah.
But what is more worrying is the fact that education minister and the director of GS. They are the people who have the key to determine how their so-called protocol people on their protocol list are allocated. So it does not matter that they put themselves in a situation where they can send their children abroad to go to school. Even the schools in Ghana, they are taking all of those. They are taking those two. So from the system, from that system, that discriminatory system, even where you could have had, at the time, I think you were the local champion in your area. That is how come that you managed to attend a private senior secondary school. You see, so now even local champions. Okay, now you are no longer a local champion. But your cousin's children who are smart like you are, even when they qualify to be in the system, somebody else somewhere can look at your name and decide that, okay, we are not going to put you there. We'll put our people there. That is how come that today, children will write and they'll get aggregate 50 something. And they're in the best schools. You can't prove it.
Mr. Ache, that tells you that even the computerized system is a bit problematic.
It is not a bit problematic.
But before I ask you to give us a bit of it, let me take the viewers from our followers, and then we'll come back and find out how problematic the system is and how can we find our way out of it. Okay. So our producer now, wherever you are, it's a pleasure again to have you on our show. We will now take the views from all our followers. This is my view show on today's Ghana News TV. Aisha comes in to that, says, I love to listen to you guys because you bring knowledge to the program. We're very grateful, my dear. And we will always do our possible best and reach out to our viewers and followers. Robert, we are grateful that you are part of the show. Say good evening, sir. Today is my first day of watching this channel and the program. I was told the prospector of fresh students is live and they are going to university, watching from St. Petersburg, Russia. We are grateful that you are part of the show, Robert. We'll look at your claims once again and see. Brimpong, watching us live from Warsaw, Portland. I'm enjoying the show. Brimpong, we're very grateful that you are part of the show, and as usual, maximum greetings to you. Our uncle Jose Superior, as usual, greetings from Barcelona, Spain, and we are grateful that you are part of the show this evening. A big shout out to our friends and listeners from Tatali through Sakina FM. Nana Tafremu, we are grateful that you are always part of the show, and through you, we reach out to many more people in Tatali in the northern region of Ghana. Mavis Watson says, hello there. Mavis, we are grateful that you are part of the show this evening. Keep watching us and keep joining us as always. Buffy Frimpong, he says, I love you guys. We love you too, Buffy, and we're grateful that you are part of the show this evening. Patience Daku, good evening, Doc, and your guest watching from Hamburg, Germany. Award-winning Patience, we're grateful that you are part of the show this evening once again. Champion Umar Dennis, comrade, we are very grateful that you are part of the show. Greetings from the great city of Bielefeld to my able, pragmatic GS and his deputy. Kudos. We are very grateful, Vice Chair, for being part of the show this evening. Ahunfe Patricia, greetings, comrades, learning from you guys. Ahunfe, we are grateful that you are part of the show this evening, and greetings to all the members in Hanover. Becky Stowe, grateful that you are part of the show this evening, Auntie Becky. I salute you, Dr. Jerome. Keep up with a good job. We are grateful, Auntie Becky, that you are part of the show, and we're wishing you all the best. We're looking forward to having you on our show once again, anytime from now, as soon as the time is right for us. So these are the views that we have just received from our followers this evening, and we're grateful that you are part of the show. We'll now come back with Honorable Alan Dachia, and then we'll look at how problematic the computerized placement system has been and our way out. So I hope my producer will now bring Mr. Dachia for us to see. So, Mr. Dachia, you are most welcome back.
Thank you very much.
So how problematic is this computerized system?
You said it's a bit problematic.
Yes.
It is not a bit problematic. It's a whole lot problematic.
Oh.
You know, because if our reasoning was to take human interference out of the system, what we have done is to introduce human interference into the system. If our reasoning was to bring equity and fairness into the system, now we've introduced discrimination and corruption into the system. If our reasoning was to bring our children to send our children to school and to give them good education and to bring them feeling that there was equity and that there was meritocracy in our system, we are now bringing children who think and know that there is nothing meritocratic about our system and that everything in our system can be bought. So there is a whole lot of rot in our system, and there's a whole lot of rot in the way that we do our computerized placement system. So it is not a small problem. It is a big problem. And like I said, the bigger problem is not the fact that we know that there's a problem. The bigger problem is the fact that they will not even allow us to prove it to them.
Okay.
You know, and my biggest frustration about the MPP government have always been, you know, when you were in school, right? The person or that child or who always score last, and when you're writing exams, the teacher is going around looking at people's answers, but when he comes, the child is covering his answer so that nobody will see, as if to say that he is writing something important on the list. Meanwhile, when the results come, the person will chop last. That is the problem with the MPP government. The problem is that they are busy messing up and covering up the mess. They will even allow people who can help them to help them. And when the thing gets rotten, the scent come out and we all hear it. But then the problem becomes too big for everybody. And that is where we are. So you're asking, how can we solve this? They say the biggest enemy to rot is light. Shine the light on this, on the process. First of all, first things first. Let's go back and do what is recommended. If we can't even do the 20%, 20 to 50, 25% that's recommended as our minimum budgetary support,
for education,
at least try and get close. We cannot get in the system, be in the system whereby continuously and progressively we are reducing the investment that we are putting in our education system. And if for nothing at all, everybody knows this, that in education, it is the basics that is important.
Yeah.
Teach people the basics. Once they get the basics, they can build upon those. But once the foundation is weak, it does not matter what you do. You can never build on a weak foundation. So, see, there is no logic in thinking that children or that parents can be so rich to cater for their children at the basic level but it be so poor to cater for their children at the secondary level. There is no reasoning to it. Why? Do we have different categories of parents? Or do we have a system whereby as soon as your children go to a secondary level, then the parents fall into different economic category? That cannot be right. It is just not rational. It's not logical. No level of reasoning can match this kind of thinking. So if we are committed, if we want to give, and I told you this the last time I was on your program, that in our country, the country that we come from, the way that we reason about education is to give our children schooling and not education. We are constantly and perpetually interested in putting our children in school. But as to what they learn in that school, we don't care. We don't care at all. We have children who we have put in schools, from primary school through to JHS, SHS, who are in teacher training schools, and yet they cannot write grammar. Their grammar is wrong. Their understanding, the whole concept of the world, the global system is wrong. And that is what we are, and these are things we are comfortable with. So like I started saying, let's go back to the basics. Go back to the basics and do the basic things. If we can do that, do the minimum requirements, that alone is going to push us a step closer to being where we ought to be. Second of all, I would propose that the so-called cyanide system, we've tried it over time. And this is not a government policy. This is not a government affair. This is a GES affair. That, of course, but this has to be spearheaded by government. That it does not give us a good enough basis for assessment. For instance, what is our basis for saying that our education system is getting weaker or is getting bad? If we cannot compare the results of one year to another. If a child can get 90% one year and get an A, and another child get 90% in another year and get a C, how do we know that the children, our system is improving or is declining? We cannot compare year on year out. Doesn't make sense. That's a flawed system, a system that we have to correct. We cannot assume that our children are so bad that majority of them must be on the average in the bell curve, and that only few can pass and few can fail. When we are under-investing, what makes us think that a majority of them are not failing? And if we are so sure that we are investing properly, what makes us think that a majority of them cannot be passing? It's not scientific. It's not logical. So that must go. In our award of system, I would propose, scrap this grading system where we are putting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. No. If in your overall placement of children in schools is going to be based on the raw scores that students get, what's the essence of the grade?
Mm-hmm.
When you mark, give them the raw scores.
Yeah.
Let the children know what their raw scores are. If I scored 5 in maths, let me know. Don't put a 9 there. 9 is what? What does 9 mean? Doesn't mean anything. Because when you go to place me, you are not looking at the 9. You are looking at my 5 that I scored. If I scored 99, let me see the 99 on my script. Don't come and give me 1. What does 1 mean? Doesn't mean anything.
It's meaningless. It's meaningless.
Yeah. So that whole grading system, it doesn't amount to anything. It just, I don't know whether it's meant to massage the egos of students or anything, but it doesn't mean anything. Because in that whole system, the grades don't account for anything. Because in the placement of children in the schools, there are raw scores that are used. So there's no need applying grades when you don't use them. So when you mark the scripts, let us see the raw scores. And that is where I say the transparency starts. And please, if we want to do, how do you call that, positive discrimination, affirmative action, the criteria ought to be known by all of us.
Mm-hmm.
The criteria ought to be known. But in any case, why should my son go to attend a school because I'm PTA chairman and he has not performed? And somebody who is not PTA chairman's son has performed better than my son, and my son will go there because of what? Because I'm PTA chairman. Isn't it the same system we are reverting back to? So please, discrimination, good, but not in this case. Let us do the discrimination by our expenditure. Spend the money where the money needs to be spent. Okay? Invest the money in the basic education system. Give them enough competitive advantage to compete with the people in the private sector, by which case you will not need to go and do positive discrimination. The universities are implementing positive discrimination in their system, and it's working. How is it working? The universities have a system of identifying people from underprivileged senior high schools. You just cannot put a blanket that every public school is disadvantaged, and then we apply discrimination. No. If we have agreed as a state that we have underinvested in our public system, let us go back to the public system. Identify the schools where we have underinvested, and then draw those things out, those people from those places out, and apply the discrimination there, and not put a blanket there. And then here's the case right now: people have discovered the system, and of course, if my son is going to, or daughter is going to write BEC and it's in private school, I know what to do. I know what to do. I just need to put them in a private school, and they'll come out, perform quite well, and and the system will discriminate in their favor anyhow, and they go to how do you call that, the best schools. And I made this argument to somebody the other day. I said the surest system, the surest way that we can prove to ourselves that our public education system is not working is to go and ask the head teachers and headmasters of basic schools. Ask them where their children are attending schools. I mean, I have cousins, I have nephews, I have nieces who have children who are teachers. And their sons and daughters, in the morning, they get up, pick their sons and daughters to private schools and go and teach in public school.
In their schools.
When we reach this point, there is no more argument about it. We have agreed that we have failed. Let's go and solve the problem and stop this clue where we have decided to make the whole system as a allocation of schools, school system placement. Like I said, in over 5 years of research, with all my university degrees, I still don't understand how that system works. So we deliberately frustrate the system, deliberately make the system very, very complex, and then we profit from it. From that corruption, from that confusion, from that chaos, we then become beneficiaries of the system, and then we exploit others to our favor. This cannot be the way to go.
So I'm pretty sure if I allow you, we will not be able to go to bed this evening. Our time has all of it. So you see, when the conversation is getting more interesting, then you realize that the time is already far spent. But I believe strongly that a lot of people have had a fair idea as to the difficulty that this computerized system has brought us and what parents are going through now. Because as we speak now, there's a lot of trouble among parents whose wards are now basically preparing to get into the SSS. But at least for this evening, we have come to understand the difficulties, even though people have gone through 5 years researching and still do not understand it. That is how it is. Once we all don't understand it, the few who are in there now are able to manipulate to their own advantage and their own interest. Thank you very much. And I'm pretty sure that as education becomes the backbone of the entire nation and going into 2024 election, remember in 2016 it was education. We're moving forward and education will still play a key role. And I'm pretty sure being the deputy secretary for your NDC in Germany, we will definitely have you more again to speak on education for your party because we will want to find out what the NDC could or would do differently in situations of this nature to bring a lot of relief to Ghanaians. Ghanaians are looking up to the NDC to come and rescue them, and you must come with a package that is well acceptable by the people of the country and knowing very well that where they are in their crime, you must move them out of that place. What would NDC be doing differently? I'm sure with time we'll come back to it. But before I let you give us your passing words, Pastor Sam just joined us from Duisburg. He says the computerized program is wrong. It's another avenue for manipulation. How is it done here in Germany? That is the question. Kudos to the presenter and then to the panelists. Auntie Becky is back again. She appreciates our request and she says, thanks so much, Doc. Looking forward to it. Definitely we'll bring Auntie Becky. Becky Stone is the deputy women's organizer for the UK and Ireland chapter, and she's going for another round of the contest should the chapter congress come up. So, Auntie Becky, we are looking forward to it. We'll definitely put you back on the show and you'll come and share more with us. So, Mr. Dachia, we'll give you the opportunity to give us your passing words as time is fast spent.
Yeah, well, I keep complaining about your use of passive words.
This is the last time. This is the last time I will repeat it for you. I will
Yeah,
you will not hear it again.
I'm not passing away anytime
I
soon. So
know. I know.
there are no passing words. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I look forward to being on this show again. And as you said, education is so important, and education is going to be important moving into this year's elections. And education should always, as it should always be important in any election because it is very critical and very vital to our very survival as a nation. So moving to this election is going to be very important. But one thing that I am very sure about, one thing that I can bet my last peso on, well, I don't have pesos, maybe euro.
Your last cent.
would be that irrespective of what the situation is, I am quite sure that NDC, being a socialist country, a socialist party, a socialist-minded party, would never underinvest in the education sector as the MPP is. I am quite sure that MPP, given the chance to continue, they are going to push this envelope further and further and jeopardize the future of the country. That is why I am sure that NDC is the only hope that Ghana has. That is, if we truly care, not about our present, but about our future, about the future of our children, about the future of our survival, about the future of our economy, about the future of the very survival of our country, that NDC is the only hope because NDC would invest in the education of the country. NDC will invest in the education of our children, and NDC would invest in the human capital of Ghanaians. This I am sure, and this I can promise. Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure. Thank you once again for making time to be part of us. Mr. Alan Dachia says the NDC will definitely invest in education, which is the future of the country. We pray and we hope so. Going forward, we will throw more light on the educational policy of NDC per their 2020 manifesto and going into 2024. And then we'll see where NDC is actually having a focus when it comes to education. For you up there, it's a pleasure having you this evening once again on MyView show. It is always great to come your way every week. As we start a week together, we share our views. And today we have looked at the computerized system in our country, Ghana, and the way forward. Whatever be the situation, take very good care of yourself. We will come back again next week at the same time on MyView show, and greatly together we will share our views on what is good for Mother Ghana. On behalf of my producer, Seth, and the entire team, we are grateful that you have joined us, and wherever you are, take good care of yourself and have a blessed night. Thank you very much for joining us.
Mampam also untie so dogo vinwa bem mampam also untie nani amuka nyina guna swati move swara mampam